think we're going to start a couple more seconds. Welcome, welcome, Esme. I think we're going to begin. We are probably going to get more participants joining in a little bit late, but we will begin and hopefully people will join us. Do introduce yourself if you haven't. Welcome. I'm Florence Martin, the director of Better Care Network. I think I know all of you. It's wonderful to see you all, and thank you for making the time. This is a meeting for the whole of the platform. It's part of a series of meetings that have taken place with colleagues from Strategy for Humanity. So this is one of, we already had 2 meetings through the Global and Policy Advocacy Working Group. And this is really an introductory meeting for colleagues at Strategy to explain what they're going to be doing and for you to have opportunities to discuss the work that they're going to be doing. First of all, before I introduce briefly the team, to say that we have live caption enabled. So if you need live captioning, all you need to do is to actually click at the bottom of your screen on the live transcript, and you'll be able to see the captioning there. So it's wonderful to see you all. When we launched the Transforming Children's Care Global Collaborative Platform at the end of 2020, we had started from a principle of inclusivity, from a principle of bringing the large community together. And the background to this was very much the work that had been happening over a period of 4 or 5 years with the development of a large coalition of actors around the UN General Assembly in 2019 and the resolution on the rights of the child, with over 250 actors across all levels joining together. It was also based, and we went back to the coalition after the UNGA and the tremendous advocacy achievements, and asked, what are you interested in continuing to work as a community? How? And on the basis of many of the answers and the recommendation, the collaborative was launched. It was also based on some of the lessons learned from some important studies that were done, and I know colleagues from Strategy are going to talk more about this, by Professor Schiffman and Yusra Shawar around both the care sector, but also what makes collaborative action impactful as well. So some of the lessons were learned from that. When we launched with the principle of inclusivity, as I mentioned, but we also launched with the openness as to what this community was going to evolve and how it's going to be organized. And we built around certain working group of collective action that were already happening on policy and advocacy, on transitioning residential care, for example. But we also established a coalition building working group. And the idea for this group was this was going to be the place for members of the platform that are interested in helping shape how the platform develops, that are interested in helping decide and think through how it should govern itself and operationalize itself. And at the beginning of that process, we had a couple of meetings of the coalition building working group, and we had some really good discussion, but we felt we needed a more kind of supported process, an independent process, to enable us to think through how this community should govern itself. How can it be representative? How can it evolve? What should it evolve to? And so we're delighted to say that we have reached out to colleagues at Strategy for Humanity, which many of you will know, who've agreed to support this process, working with you, working with the coalition building working group, to think through what the options are for this community to organize, to operationalize its its development, and its decision-making processes. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Alex Arriaga to start with, and Alex is in a slightly challenging technological position at the airport. So I will hand out to you, Alex, to introduce your team before you need to jump on a plane. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. And I am really delighted to see everyone who has joined us today. I know many of you, I enjoy working with all of you. And for those who I have not had the chance to meet yet, I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. So we have had well, first let me say, as Florence has said, I am at the airport, so I will be taking, my flight is leaving soon. I'm heading to South America to where my family is. And I will be turning off my video and muting myself as soon as possible, just to prevent myself from distracting from the presentation. I am joined today by two of my great colleagues. In terms of myself, my background is in international human rights issues. I've worked on policy issues, on strategic planning, governance issues, a lot of issues on gender-based violence and on children's rights, as well as disabilities and education. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves, but just to say that we are going to be collaborating closely with many of you. We will have multiple ways of engaging with all of you. We are looking at ways to engage you so that we can have your input. Our role will be to provide recommendations to the Coalition Working Group so that the Coalition Working Group can decide on the participatory governance and decision-making mechanism for the full platform. And we are looking forward to having as much platform-wide participation in this process as possible. So with that, let me turn it over to my colleagues, Tabitha Parmira and Kelly Case, who will walk us through the slides and also respond to questions and engage in discussion. So why don't we begin with you, Tabitha?
Thank you, Alex. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm also on the phone as my Wi-Fi has refused to work. I'm in Sierra Leone right now. So, but I hope everybody can hear me. It's so great having each and every one of you on here. I look forward to meeting you all. I'll just do a quick intro of who I am, pass it over to Kelly for her introduction, and she'll pass it back to me to get us started on this presentation. And we do want to say that this is the same exact presentation we've made for the other smaller groups that we have had. So if you have been on there, you're more than welcome to stay, but just so you know, we're sharing the same information so that the bigger platform has that as well. So I'm Tabitha Mamira, originally from Rwanda, live in Michigan. I am part of one of the directors at Strategy for Humanity, and most of my background as a psychologist, doing a lot of work with gender-based violence, grassroots, and currently also been part of work on movement building, especially around the work of protecting children, children's rights and women's rights across the globe. So that's a little bit about me. I look forward to knowing more about all the incredible work you each do. And over to you, Kelly.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to meet you. I do see some familiar faces. Lovely to see you all again. So my name is Kelly Case. I'm a managing director at Strategy for Humanity. I also work very closely on some children's rights issues, doing advocacy work in the US to make children a top priority for the US government globally. I also wear a consulting hat at Strategy for Humanity and do a lot of work on gender, particularly women's inclusion and gender integration and mainstreaming. So sort of a broad spectrum of different areas of work. And I'm really excited to engage in this process with you all. So I'm going to turn it back to Tabitha and I'm going to share my screen. So we'll go through some slides and then leave a little bit of time for some Q&A at the end.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, so as you all probably have already been hearing from everybody via emails, we're just gonna go over our way of working, give you a little bit of information on what this process is going to look like, and then go from there. As Kelly said, we'll open it up for some questions at the end, but also mention that we are accessible to you throughout this whole process. So if we don't cover everything you have questions about in this session, that there will be more opportunities to engage with you all. All right, so quick agenda. Next slide. The welcomes have been done, and we're going to now talk to you a little bit about strategy for humanity, our process, give you an idea of the timeline it will take us to get all of this done, and back to Q&A. All right, so who is Strategy for Humanity? So we are mission-driven. We work with mission-driven organizations and those who fund them. So we try to work together to develop these strategies that can help move advocacy and analyze so we can all achieve meaningful results together. So we know that this work can't be done without each and everybody's contribution. And we also have the same values like Florence mentioned around inclusion and diversity. And we really try to practice what we preach, which also includes all the people on our team that were represented by, it's a women-led, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, survivor-owned business. So that since 2009, that's an intention that we live by. And you'll hear me say this over and over again. So if nothing else, you'll hear inclusion very often throughout this. So how we bring value to working with you each is making sure that we do align and have a shared vision and effective plans. So we're not coming in to tell you what needs to be done, but it's a collaboration to come to the best results together. And so we're proud that we've supported over 70 organizations across the globe, and we have been able to increase their impacts in the work that they do, which is what we hope to achieve with you all. And so as far as this process, we try to be efficient and timely in how we work together. Transparency is key. It's an intention for us. So that's why I was saying each of you will have direct communication with us as we go on through this process. And our methods have been proven in the main space, multiple forms of engagement. As I mentioned, we consult with each of you. We're inclusive, collaboration. Most of this I'm really repeating myself, but these are the same objectives that also BCN holds, and that this is going to be an inclusive collaboration for finding the effective solutions that we are all looking for. And so what we do, we'll be providing recommendations for the governance and decision-making mechanism. So again, using those same values I've been mentioning, we're hoping to find what we're looking for with the coalition building working group. And that is where Strategy for Humanity is mainly going to be focused. So that's how we do and who we are. Now, how do you come in? And the reason we've invited you here is so that you understand that this is your process. So without you, nothing can be done. We'll be engaging with you in multiple ways. We really look forward to hearing about your insights, your wisdom. The information you have is key to finding the right recommendations. So we really encourage and hope that you're participatory, which just by being here shows that you are, in offering your feedback without holding back so that we can weigh in on those recommendations for mechanism. So back to transparency and collaboration, it's really you who drive this process. And so we're open to hearing, sharing everything that you know, have seen that works, and those things that do not work, they're just as important. So that will be your role in this process with us. All right, so what has been done so far and how we hope to finalize this? Around the month of May, we were doing the design and research, getting to know and understand BCN and the process, and all of that is to come. Then June and July, kind of the intake. So we started part of what we're doing right now is doing those events and presentations. So we get to know you, you get to know us, and what the process is going to look like. We are going to engage, especially in July, in a round of discussion groups. So some of you will hear from us around those. But because we want to be inclusive, not everybody is as open or availability, whatever the reasons are, you might not be able to make it to such groups. So we have a survey that you can do at your own time. And some people are better at communicating orally or in a written form. So you have also that opportunity to do both and or either or. And we will then eventually get into follow-up interviews. We can do one-on-ones with those key people, either who want to engage further after we do all these other ways of engagement. So July and August, after we've done that, that will be our time to analyze everything we have seen and heard, then design something to propose for the governance and decision-making mechanism that we have been called on to do. And hopefully September, we present and finalize our proposal. But as we know, with time and COVID and everything that is going on in the world, it becomes, sometimes we also have to stay flexible that these times might not work for various reasons, but this is our hope, and we're outlining what we hope to achieve by September. So just working with keeping that in mind with grace and compassion of everything that people are going through. We know that we might not hear from everybody in a timely manner, but hope that we can finalize and present everything by September. Okay, so the ways of engagement I was talking about, what do they all mean? And I won't take too much time on this. So on web events, that's what kind of like this, where we will summarize and our approach and kind of share this. So we've already had two for multiple people, and there should be, we're keeping in mind around translation, and we have captions. So if you joined a little later after Catherine mentioned, you can click on something where captions can come on for those for being inclusive for everybody who might not be hearing this as easily. So then we'll get into those group sessions. Everybody who is invited will get emails. Please respond and get, if times don't work for you, we're trying to stay very flexible on time zones so that people all who want to participate have access and an opportunity to share their ideas. And surveys will be coming out. So there'll be a lot of emails coming your way, so you can hear from as many people as possible. So because your work is so important that we don't want to leave any voices out. And then eventually follow up as needed, like I mentioned before, for those who wanted to share more or those we want to hear more from. Okay, so as you can see, we've already had a few of these platforms. This is our last one today on 28th. And our next step, you're going to be getting more emails around surveys in the smaller groups that are coming in July. So thank you for being here on the one today. All right. So now that's kind of what the process is going to look like, how we are hoping to engage with you. And so what is the purpose? Why are we doing this work with you all? In Transforming Children's Care Global Collaborative Platform, I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, and that's why you're here. The purpose for it is having that community of organizations and actors like each of you in this space to work to protect and to engage in child protection. And so one of the purposes and what we hope to do is within this platform that people can help build on each other's work, that people can, or different organizations can agree on common principles and approaches. We know there's power in numbers, strength in numbers. So the more people that are engaging in this can help secure greater and more sustainable impacts if it's all aligned and contribute to that shared learning. So we're hoping to undertake this joint advocacy with you, support you in creating a system and a mechanism that everybody is aligned with in order to create this impact that we hope is an outcome for this. And so lastly, on my part, and then before I hand it over to Kelly, so we are working directly with the Coalition Building Working Group, and their purpose is to design the vision and objectives of the platform in the operational framework. So we want to hear about what is important to you, what would you want to see or not see, what have you been involved in before that didn't work, and what has worked. And more importantly, again, like I said, keyword is inclusive, that every voice, every group is included so that the membership can truly reflect the people who are doing the work. And collaboration. So collaboration, inclusivity, again, that's so we can find evidence for that impact. Transitional residential care working groups, there's policy and advocacy working groups. So we want to collaborate across the different groups. That way the whole platform is coming together to build what it has set out to build. So on that note, I'll pass to Kelly, and at the end of hers, we can open it up for questions and answers. Excited and looking forward to hearing more from you all. Over to you, Kelly.
Great, thank you. So Tabitha just walked us through the process that we're going to undertake over the next few months. But as part of this, so obviously you all are really leading this process. Your input and feedback is critical to developing recommendations for what this governance system looks like. But what we're also working on is using some of the process learnings from Shawar and Schiffman and Gillian Hubner to come up with models and ideas of what might be most useful, and then really get your input and feedback on what would be most effective for this platform. So the next couple of slides are just going to go through some of those high-level takeaways that we wanted to point out, and then we'll go through a couple of the other criteria that we're going to be looking at as we go through the next few months. So just a couple of quotes here from Shawar and Schiffman about the care sector in particular, that disagreements among proponents have led to weak governance mechanisms and inadequate positioning of the issue. And that internal disagreements have fragmented the community and complicated efforts. So we really, the platform is a really amazing opportunity to bring the group together, and we want to make a participatory decision-making governance structure that is effective and inclusive and meets the needs for all of you. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that there were, from Shawar and Schiffman, had studied the differing degrees of effectiveness of various networks and identified 4 sort of critical areas in generating resources and attention for the issues. And those were the problem definition, which is generating internal consensus, the positioning, portraying the issue in a way that inspires external audiences, coalition building, establishing institutions to facilitate collective action, like the platform, governance, and establishing a mechanism that facilitates this action. On top of that, we also have Gillian Hubner, who came up with 4 sort of additional criterias or areas, 4 elements that impact the effectiveness of global networks as well. And that was evidence and data, that there really you need to establish an evidence-based targets, indicators, and data collection and reporting mechanism. There needs to be a strategy. There needs to be a consensus around sort of time-bound action plans with goals, objectives, targets, indicators, roles, and responsibility. There also has to be sort of an assessment to which goals and objectives are incorporated into policy. And then funding, obviously, is always really critical to establishing a mechanism to receive, disperse, and track funds. So we're going to be looking sort of at 3, primary modes of network governance. And this is not to say that one of these is going to be the exact fit for the platform. It could be a combination of these, but these are sort of the 3 primary modes of network governance. A shared governance model where most or all network models interact. Network members interact on a relatively equal basis. There's a lead organization model where all major network level activities and key decisions are coordinated through this body. And then the third is really the network administrative organization. So this is sort of a separate entity that's set up specifically to govern the network and its activities. So again, these are 3 sort of primary models of network governance, but it does not mean that this one size is going to fit this platform. It's likely going to be a combination of the 3. So also what, it's just as a reminder of what Gillian Huebner's paper provided, some of the key learnings, takeaways from child-focused global partnerships in particular. These are also relevant for the process of developing a participatory governance and decision-making mechanism. So, she talked about a data-driven agenda. So, successful partnerships mobilize around an evidence base and agreed upon data set, which we kind of covered in the last couple of slides. There's also what she called a yesable framing, where collaborative partnerships are most effective when stakeholders understand the differences, but act on shared commonalities. And this is really key for collective action. I mean, you all know better than we do. The third is this inside out strategy, where effective global coordination networks engage stakeholders at multiple levels within and outside the network. And whatever, sort of governance model we recommend to the platform should really enable this. So there's a balance of power between stakeholders, leveraging influence for systemic change, so sort of a broad range of stakeholders. Next is accountability mechanisms. So transparency is builds trust and must exist in any governance strategy, funding, or reporting. And again, sort of going to this inside out strategy, we need to ensure that top heavy participants don't, squeeze out local and grassroots actors. And then finally, the affected populations as primary stakeholders. So not surprising, all too often, affected populations are not engaged as primary stakeholders, and their engagement and leadership helps to build not only the movement's credibility, but really provide sort of that ground truth. And so these are sort of the 5 primary key learning takeaways from her research on child-focused global partnerships. So all of these sort of learnings we're taking into consideration, and want to share the next slide. So what we're going to be doing now as we start getting input from you all, we go through all these sort of lessons learned, is that we're looking at how the platform can be organized and who will make decisions and how. So the platform has a fairly large and diverse membership with a range of missions and visions, and it really needs a structure which enables collective action, but also being inclusive and flexible and able to make decisions. So the governance structure is an important outline for who has power in the network and who can make decisions, and how member voices are heard and who's accountable to them. So a key aspect of this is related to the trust that I had just mentioned. And it matters who's selected in this governance structure, and that there's clarity in their roles, and that the development and the resulting process is participatory. I know we do keep saying this, participatory and inclusive, but it's really important, and we want to make sure we empower and encourage people to engage and develop develop the platform, and that will really be key to its success in the long run. So building on Gillian Huebner's learnings, we are currently exploring a few key areas in further detail, and more networks also. So the areas that we're going to be looking at in further detail is really the governance structure, selection process, and decision-making process, to better capture some of these learnings and to support the data collection and our eventual recommendations in the next few months. So in addition to the 5 networks that Gillian Huebner identified, we've added 4 additional networks. And the sample here should not be viewed just as representative. Rather, we have looked at each network individually and pulled out key points for illustrative purposes to show and support the current process and to inform our recommendations. So some of the criteria and implications we need to consider. So all of these have positive aspects, but there are also implications for each, right? So for example, in a highly consultative process, it can be less timely. A set structure and process is transparent, but can be less flexible. A more flexible approach can appear arbitrary. A structure where all groups and subgroups are represented can be positive for legitimacy, but it can also be cumbersome and affect decision-making. So as we're exploring what a participatory governance and decision-making mechanism looks like for the platform, all of these factors are important to weigh carefully and to take into account as we create as you all create the system, to make sure it's both engaging and effective. So quick timeline. So Tabitha already talked about it in the beginning of the presentation, but just wanted to be clear sort of where we're at. So May, we started the design and research. June has really been focused on introduction of this process, so you all know what's to come and how we will be asking for you to engage. We'll be starting our discussion group sessions this month, and then July is going to be a lot of the data intake, including survey and analysis. And then August and September are still going to be some of the data intake, and then really September is, again, as Tabitha said, this could change given schedules and everything that's going on in the world. But the idea is to hopefully have those recommendations in September. And I also just want to reiterate that while we have those different modes of engagement that we mentioned earlier in the presentation, at any point we welcome you all to please reach out to us throughout this entire process. If you have an idea that just came to your mind and you forgot to mention, or you want to have a separate conversation with us, please know that we are really open to engaging with you all, throughout this process. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up for questions. Or if Alex wanted to add anything else.
No, I think you covered it well. I'm just listening in here because there's a lot of background noise. But yeah, I'm looking forward to questions and discussion. Thank you.
So feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat if you do have any questions.
Hi, everyone. I can't raise my hand. This is Philip Goldman from Maestro Internet. I apologize.
Philip, you're breaking up a bit, so we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, it seems to be better.
Okay, you mentioned that this collaborative consists of a lot of organizations with different missions and visions. Wondering if we have a good mission statement, latest one for the collaborative that we can have read out to us or could hear now to help inform our thinking on organization.
I would say that that's a really great question for our colleagues, Florence and who's been interacting, and Catherine, and also Margot and Rebecca, who've been interacting directly with the working group. Our job has been really to interact with Better Care Networks so that they can help us interact with all of you. So I'm sure that's a question for them. Do you guys want to respond?
Yeah, I can. Definitely. Thank you, Philip. It's a really good question. So I will actually put it in the box, and it was mentioned earlier in the presentation. When we launched the platform, we had a generic, or maybe generic is not the right, but we had agreed on a vision which is around addressing that collaborative action around children's care, building on the consensus that was adopted by most, on most issues, not all issues, around the General Assembly and the key recommendation that were developed at the time. So we, on purpose, built on that. And so there is a commitment, of course, to the international standards. There's a commitment on working from local to global around children's care. And leveraging each other's efforts. I'll put the mission in the box again, the statement again. But what we didn't do, and the inclusivity was part of that, what we didn't do is articulate this more closely, because we felt that this was something that actually the collaborative needed to do. Because the vision and mission, and I apologize for my cat that's joining the conversation, the vision and mission in many ways is a key part actually of the governance. It's a key part of determining what the collaboration is about. And so we did a bit of a chicken and egg. We said, okay, there is a large agreement around what needs to be done in relation to children's care. There's a large agreement in terms of what we can do together, what we can achieve together, but there's also some fundamental disagreements still on some key issues. And the platform is a place for us to start addressing these, to build on the consensus, but also to try to identify how do we resolve some of the disagreement and how do we leverage each other. But on purpose, we did not try to refine this further because we felt this is something for the community to do as it starts working together. So we did a bit of a chicken and egg on that one. But the one thing I will say is once the operational mechanisms, once the decision making, the governance body is established, one of the key roles for them will be to refine and determine whether that mission needs to be further refined, it needs to be addressed differently. So I'm not sure whether that answers your question, Philip, but it was set in very broad ways around the areas where we feel there is a large consensus, but it also created the space to recognize that this is going to need to evolve, and it particularly will need to address the fragmentation and disagreement in this community. I hope that makes sense.
That's very helpful, Florence. And I think for me, when I think about governance, it is chicken and egg because resolving differences implies a need for a very kind of flat, very collaborative approach to how we work together. But one of the opportunity areas I see for the collaborative is in common advocacy. I look at a Thrive Coalition, for example, and I'm so envious of what they've been able to accomplish collectively, and often wish that the care sector could come that far along in how we work together. That to me might suggest a somewhat different, a little bit more hierarchical, structured, supported form of governance. So this maybe some of the questions about areas where we see the collaborative going could be discussed a little bit up front as a bit of background to thinking about how we want to organize ourselves.
I'm going to jump in there, Philip. I think you raised a really important. Thank you, Philip. I'm going to jump in. I think you raise a really important point, and just to say two things. One is that in addition to the coalitions that we listed in the slides that we are looking into for their governance and decision-making mechanisms, we have added additional ones beyond that. And we're looking also at Thrive, which has a lot of differences from this sector. It's a much smaller group, but still, we are looking at more groups that have been recommended to us through the last two sessions that we did, introductory sessions. And so we would invite people who have recommendations about groups that we should be looking at to put those into the chat. Groups that we should be looking at in terms of how do they structure themselves for governance and decision making. There will be some commonalities and there will be some important differences, but that's our job, is to do that analysis and comparison and then bring it back. The second thing I wanted to say is that the next step in this process, just to underscore, really pleased that all of you are with us today. Many of you have received emails from us already to invite you to a discussion group, a smaller discussion group. We are going to be organizing several discussion groups. Many of them are grouped by what you might have in common. So for example, the very large organizations that are international in nature, national or very regional organizations and their perspectives, parent advocacy groups, groups that focus largely on disability rights, care leavers, and others as we come to this. So it's meant to have several experts, or many experts with some common experiences, come together and provide us more feedback. That will be the opportunity when we will be testing out a lot of the different methods. That's when we will be applying the analysis that we've done about different governances and receiving more direct feedback based on the learnings that we have, and and help us hone potential recommendations. Simultaneously, we are preparing an online survey, which will go into much greater detail. That survey will be translated into other languages, and that will be a way for participants platform-wide to provide us with much greater detail and insights about what this should look like. And so just to bring those two pieces out in a little more detail so you understand how we will be honing recommendations and seeking additional guidance from all of you as we then do the analysis and then put together recommendations.
Great. Any other questions you want to raise in the chat or raise your hand? So just a couple of things to note, as just want to make sure if anybody else has questions or comments, we have time, but just wanted to note in terms of our group discussions, we are meeting with a wide range of participants, which Alex may have just mentioned, but we're meeting with care leavers, we're meeting with actors with lived experience, parent advocates, disability rights actors, so really trying to get a broad spectrum input. Also, what I would like to do is I'm actually going to put in the chat. This is not a methodical approach to data input, but I want to put in here, I've sent a link to a Menti. If you all have the chance, and I won't pull up the responses right now. And again, this is not it's just an opportunity for us to glean. There's 2 questions in this link around sort of what are the characteristics to you for a good decision-making mechanism, and also what is important to you. So if you have a chance to fill out those 2 questions, that would be really helpful. It just gives us a quick framing on where you are at in terms of what you think the structure is, what is needed with this participatory governance structure. And with that, I'll open it back up if there are any other questions or comments.
I'm unmuting myself. Hi, I'm Claudia from SOS Children's Villages International. I just wanted to make a quick reflection just as an input, because I don't know if academic or research actors are considered as part of the type of stakeholders you're going to consult in addition to care leavers, etc. I would like to know if you do. And the reason why I'm asking is that everybody believes in the power of evidence when we do advocacy, but also when we provide guidance for programmatic responses and so on. However, it's not so straightforward to understand which evidence and when evidence is evidence, right? Because maybe you have 3 pieces of research and all of a sudden they become the evidence for the whole sector, and that's where sometimes a conflict arises, that people don't recognize that piece of evidence as credible, as sound enough, and so on. So I think it would be beneficial to also listen to some voices from the research world, whether it's academic or more independent think tanks. Yeah, I don't know if you had thought about that.
Thank you so much for that comment, Claudia. A few responses. We completely agree that that's a very important sector. And as you can see, just from our slides, we are in fact looking at existing research and both academic and a variety of different sources, as well as looking at research about that we can glean from other experiences. That said, we also understand that researchers, practitioners, and many others have important voices. We are confident that we will capture many of them through the online survey, and some of them through the discussion groups as well. So that's our current plan, is to involve some through the discussion groups, and then a much broader lens through the online survey. If there are specific recommendations that you have for us, for individuals that you think are critically knowledgeable, for us to consider, we would invite you to please share that with us. We're very open to getting your recommendations, because we acknowledge that those experts have a lot to share that will inform this process.
What would be the appropriate channel to share this input? Will we be reached by an email, or should I send you an email, or how can I point you to someone? Yeah.
Let us put into the chat our email contact information. We have one email that reaches all of us at Strategy for Humanity, and then we have individual emails. So we will put that in the chat so that you can contact us directly.
Thank you.
And just if I may add, Alex, on this, Claudia, it's a really good question. As you know, there's a large evidence working group on the platform, which is made up of many of the academics that are working, doing research in this field. Although there are many more, and it needs to expand further. And there's also a measurement task force. And so many of these actors are involved in the platform already. And so they will be consulted through the different mechanisms from that. But definitely encourage you, if you've got other additional that may not already be part of the evidence working group or the measurement task force, please do share their contacts and reach out to the strategy team. Thank you.
Super, thanks.
I just put all of the contact information in the chat. Any other questions, comments?
Let me just say one more thing, that we're most interested in being in touch with people who are participating in the platform. And this is also an opportunity to bring some of those other experts into the platform if they're not already engaged. So just to say that since we're looking at how to create mechanisms for the platform, we're especially interested in engaging members of the platform. But of course, we will be looking at outside external expertise as well, so that this can really be well informed.
And sorry, one last thing to note is that, we will be, as part of the coalition building working group sort of role, we'll be working with them closely. If you are interested in being more engaged in this process, please do consider joining the coalition building working group. We'd be delighted for you to join that, but we will be working closely with that group as well as BCN. So I see there's a chat box, from Stephen about resourcing. That's a really important point. And I think in terms of our process, we will do our best to engage with you through the different modes that we had talked about through these web events, group discussions, survey, et cetera, and any follow-up as needed. So we want to make sure that we get all of that input and feedback from even those that might be less resourced. And in terms of those bodies effectively participating in the actual governance decision-making body, I think that's sort of to be determined as we go through this analysis, get input and feedback, but point really well taken. And something we will definitely consider as we start pulling this information together. Anything else? Well, I think we're going to give you all a little bit of your time back, but just want to say thank you so much for your time and your participation. We're grateful that you joined, and we're really looking forward to engaging with you in this process. And please do reach out if you have any ideas, thoughts as we sort of embark on the input and gathering data. We welcome any insights and thoughts. And I'll pass it over to Alex or Florence or Tabitha to say any last words.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody, and again, apologies for my background noise, but looking forward to engaging further. And I'll pass it to Tabitha and then back to Florence.
Same here. Thank you. I got off video for network purposes, but I'm here. So I just want to also echo everything they just said. Thank you all, and looking forward to hearing from you in different places. Well,
yeah, I have nothing to add except please do join the Coalition Building Working Group and engage both with the process directly with the team at Strategy, but also with the working group. That's how you're going to be able to shape how this community operates. And there are tensions, and as the team has pointed out, in terms of choices to be made. But the mechanism is definitely going to be better by having your thoughts, your contribution, your ideas, and you engaging actively. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.